Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night from all corners of the globe. I am your host, Michael Swigert, here on the New Human Project podcast. For the second episode, we will be speaking with Jade Cessna. Jade Cessna is an upcoming author who published her first book, Dreamer to Doer. Jade offers a range of services such as life planning and inspirational and informative content on Instagram. Today we will be discussing Jade's early adulthood, her path to becoming an author, and how you can overcome the obstacles of getting stuck and start working towards your dreams today. Dreamer to Doer is available now for purchase on Amazon. Stay tuned for lessons on how to turn your dreams into reality, here on the New Human Project podcast. Hello and welcome to the second episode of TNHP.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's great to have you. I'm really excited to talk about your book today. There was a lot of interesting content and things that I would like to discuss with you. But first, let's talk about who you are. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to become an author?
Yeah, so my name is Jade and I am 23 years old. We were just discussing on the walk here how we're the same age, so we're in the same phase of life and going through very similar things. But my love for reading and writing really started when I was younger. Ever since I was a young girl, I loved going to the library. I saved up my Barnes & Noble gift cards to be able to save them or spend them every year. And I was always so excited to just read and immerse myself in a different world. I think it really started with the Magic Tree House series. I don't know if you ever read that. Yeah,
I read a lot of those when I was younger.
Yeah, and like Junie B. Jones, those were my favorite when I was younger.
I know those as well.
Yeah. And so I always had a love for reading and writing, but as I progressively got older and went through school, I had to read and write for school specifically, and that kind of buried the love that I had because I was no longer reading for fun, like books that I wanted to read, but I was reading books that were assigned to me that I might not have had an interest in reading, and I was having to write in a certain format, like I was having to write in APA or MLA format, which really restricted my writing, and I knew that if I didn't write a certain way, I wouldn't get the grade that I wanted, and so the love that I had had since I was little and the obsession really that I had had since I was little began to be buried under the expectations that school put on me and kind of constrained that creativity in a way. And so I really didn't rediscover my love for reading and writing until after graduating college. And I was trying to kind of fill up my free time after working a 9 to 5. And I started blogging on the internet to do so. And all of a sudden I felt like a wave of just kind of peace and love and creativity flow back into me now that I could write and read for fun again.
I agree with you. Writing and reading for fun are a lot different than writing and reading for school. Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that changed for you once you got out of school, because I dealt with kind of a similar thing. I've read a few books in the past year, mm-hmm. and I've actually looked forward to reading, which is very odd. Right. And I think that school and being forced to do those things kind of makes you almost fall out of love with those things. Sure. So I can completely understand that.
Because it was like I had to read 20 pages of, a fiction book for whatever history class, or I had to read a textbook or something like that, and I had to study it or report on it. I couldn't just read it for fun and really kind of immerse myself into the book when I had to read for school. Yeah,
I feel like a lot of young adulthood is sort of rediscovering those things that you enjoy after so many years of being told what to do. You now have a little bit of freedom to where you can decide what you want to do. And I'm curious, why did you choose, so Dreamer to Doer, you would categorize as a self-help book, correct?
Yes, I would.
What made you decide to do a self-help book?
I think that self-help was the most natural kind of category for me to go into just because of what I think about on a day-to-day basis. Fiction writing has always intimidated me because you have to come up with like a whole universe and these characters and their backstories and how they feel about it. I'm like, okay, I don't really want to think through that right now. Maybe one day I'll kind of delve into fiction. But I knew that self-help was the right category because really the standpoint that I was writing this book from was, hey, I really wanted to help my younger self. Like myself, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, really could have heard the things that I'm writing about right now. And so that's really what made me realize that, like, hey, I think this is a self-help book, and that's how it'll most benefit others.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, the impact that the self-help book had, I've read a few philosophy-oriented books and things like that, but from the perspective of someone that I know writing a self-help book, that was very powerful. I think that as your first book, writing a self-help book versus a fiction or, something that's more based in, I don't know, maybe history or something like that, I feel like writing a book in self-help leaves a strong impact and impression on you, on other people, for you as an author.
I never thought about it that way, so thank you.
Well,
that's very nice.
Yeah, of course. And it gives you kind of an insight into the person that you are. And a lot of the book, you go into sort of personal examples. And I feel that's very powerful because oftentimes the author is kind of detached from the subject that they're talking about. And this really puts you in the book. And I think that's what I enjoyed most, was it was very personal.
Thank you. And I mean, that's scary as a writer.
Yes.
As I was writing these stories, first of all, when you write the stories, you revisit the emotion and the experience. And there were times where I was sitting at my keyboard and there were tears in my eyes because I was revisiting such a hard time in my life that was bringing about those feelings and those emotions. But you also don't want to write it to where it's too emotional and it's too biased and people aren't understanding the point of your story and it feels like just an excerpt from your journal, because that's not the point either. But I have been really scared for like close family and friends to read my book because they are going to literally get insight to what's happening inside of my head. And even like my grandma, she is on my launch team and she was the first person to finish reading the book. And she brought up some comments and I'm like, holy crap, she knows even though I don't mention anybody by name, like I don't even mention the relationships to me, so then you can't figure out who I'm talking about. People who are close to me are gonna know. You know what I mean? Like they're totally gonna know who I'm talking about. And she's like, yeah, well, I think you were right about that situation. And when you were writing about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, she knows who I'm talking about. You know what I mean? It's freaking scary to kind of put that out in the world and know that people are really getting an intimate image and being included into my thought processes and how I view and perceive the world around me.
Yeah, of course. But I think with a book like this, it's very important to express yourself honestly. And that's that's one of the reasons I have you here on this podcast, is obviously, that's one of the things that I'm trying to center around is self-help and, becoming your full self, which is a focus of your book, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I have to talk to you. I have to read this book. And as we get into it more, that'll reveal itself. Yeah. So I wanted to start talking about your book. We're going to kind of go through it a little chronologically. However, we're not going to touch on everything because there's a lot of good things in there that I can't cover in one episode of a podcast. And also, I want people to read it for themselves and take away what they can. So in the first part of your book, sort of in the introduction and first few chapters, you talk about this idea of the waiting room. What is the waiting room and why are so many people in it?
Yeah. So the waiting room of your life is a space where people kind of wait for the right time, the right moment, or the right pieces of the puzzle to fall in place before they start to work towards their dreams. they have either some sort of mental blockade, is usually what it is, that prevents them from seeing that now is the perfect time to be working towards your dreams, and that you don't have to be waiting for these certain indications to actually start taking the steps and taking the leap to work towards whatever your real dreams are for life. And I think it's really easy to get stuck in the waiting room because you believe that you have to have all of these things in place in order to start working towards something. But the reality of like writing my book is I had no idea what I was doing. I was making my best guesses of like the direction that I needed to go and how I needed to do this. And over time, as I was walking that path and ensuring that I was embodying the type of person who wrote a book and the type of person who became an author, things just started to fall into place. And I feel like when you are in the waiting room of your life, it's a very passive approach to living your life and to, realizing your dreams.
Yeah, I agree. And in the book, you go in later and talk about being an active participant of your life and letting life happen, you choosing kind of what happens to you. Well, I mean, not letting life happen to you, but being an active participant in it. And that seems kind of like what you're saying with the waiting room is we're just sitting here waiting for things to happen, almost like a limbo, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was curious, you already touched on why people get stuck here, but I was curious, have you ever been stuck there yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was when I was in school, I was always focused on my studies. Like, I took school very seriously, and my one goal was to graduate and to get a job outside or after graduating school, because I thought that's what you had to do. And that's very much the image that was kind of pushed onto me as a kid, which is not even the path that my parents took. Like, my parents went to college as adults and worked their way up the corporate ladder. But I think that after graduating high school, I was in the waiting room of my life because I was following this path that everybody else was kind of creating for me and telling me that I should go down. And I had made it, right? Like, I had gotten a 9 to 5 right out of college, and not a lot of people get that opportunity. I moved to a different state. I was living on my own. I was completely and financially independent from my parents. I was providing for myself. And then I just look around, like, I'm standing in my apartment, fully furnished, bought everything. You know what I mean? Like, this is my life. And I'm like, this isn't right. This just does not feel right. And I had to take a step back, and it's like, okay, well, I met all of these indications or these markers of success that society has told me to meet, and I don't feel successful. So something is wrong. And that's when I realized I was in the waiting room of my life.
I agree with a lot of those sentiments as well. I feel like not just me, but a lot of the people I know who are in the same age group. And I think this is wonderful that we're practically the same age because I feel like I can relate to a lot of what you say. And I'm sure even people who read your book that are older at different stages of their life can benefit. However, I think that graduating college or as a young person going into the real world, so to speak, I feel like that's such a fallacy in and of itself. But regardless, there's a lot of things that you have to adjust to. Um, you don't always have a clear path. And I think that's something that you also touch on in your book. But you don't always have a clear path on where you're going. And everything that you're taught from a young age is gearing you towards this ultimate goal of whatever that may be, whatever success is in the eyes of yourself that is instilled by your peers. And I feel like perhaps maybe that has something to do with also peer pressure and that sort of groupthink of we need to all be a part of this specific ideology of success or ideal of success, I guess you would say.
And I feel like in our heads, there's this like end goal that we're supposed to reach. But first, I feel like 75% of people couldn't even articulate what that end goal is.
I can't.
Secondly, when you get to that end goal, there's always going to be more. You're never going to be at an end goal. You're always going to be striving for more. You're always going to want more, for different reasons per person, obviously. But the idea of an end goal is just so silly to me because it's just, it doesn't even really exist.
No, it doesn't. And when you also mentioned in the book talking about enjoying the process, you have to love the process. I'm sure I can pull up the quote here later because you have many great quotes that we'll touch on. But the process, the enjoyment of the process is really what ultimately decides if you'll succeed. And I found in my own life with, through things like martial arts or whatever other hobbies that I keep adding to fill up my time, that the enjoyment that I get from those things, even though they may be very difficult and time consuming, or even this podcast, like I have to edit this afterwards, so it's going to be a pain in the ass.
Good luck.
Thank you. But it's something that I know that it's something that I love, that I want to keep doing regardless of what happens. And I think that and this is in my own opinion, this isn't entirely related to the book, but I'm sure you may agree that being taught the idea of success versus being taught the idea of passion is a very different thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in school, and we keep referring back to this because it's such a big part of our lives still. Like we, as 23-year-olds, having only been out of college for like a year or two, school has still taken up a majority of our lives. And that is still the perspective through which we view life oftentimes. And I think that, because of the standards that are in place and how they're trying to educate us, which we won't even go down the path of the education system because that's a whole nother hour added to this podcast. But I do think that it kind of buries the passions that you were more or less born with as a child, as you try to meet these standards and requirements that are placed upon you.
Yeah, and I agree as me and some of my friends have discussed, and I'm sure you understand as well, the idea that you suddenly become an adult the moment that you get out of school is also very untrue. Yeah. The best way I've heard it put, and my one friend who told me this, I'm sure if he's listening, he'll know exactly who he is, but he said basically that you're a infant. As a young adult, you're essentially an infant. You're being kind of thrown in the world to discover all these things for yourself. And that can seem scary, but at the same time, I feel like it's a point of rediscovery and learning to enjoy the things that you maybe once had or wanted to do or have always been planning to do, but just never had the time or obviously monetary resources to do so. Yeah. And I feel like that's why this is such like a critical time in your life for developing those skills for achieving your dreams. And that's another reason why I think this book is so powerful and needed, especially at this time.
Yeah, I think that our early 20s are never to be taken for granted. It's a time where we have the freedom and are just kind of now coming into also the monetary resources to financially support our dreams and whatever other goals that we have. And we also, most of us, this isn't the case for everyone, obviously, but we don't have too many responsibilities. We really just have to take care of ourselves and make sure that we're meeting our needs. Now, a lot of people at this age start having families, and that's a completely different thing. And if that's your dream, go for it. Like, do it. Start working towards it. But in your 20s, I really want to stress that this is the time not for you to focus on how to start getting settled in life, not for you to focus on, how do I start, how do I want to phrase this? I think I'll just leave it at that. I don't want us to focus on how can we get settled in life, but how can we discover and rediscover our purpose and our passions in life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a very crucial thing you touched on in that tidbit there too was this book obviously is for a wide range of people, anyone who can benefit from it, but more specifically younger people in their 20s, looking at our age group. Like you said, we don't have the same responsibilities as, say, someone who's early middle life, who maybe their parents are a little bit older and they have to take care of them, kids, as well as job. So getting a lot of your self-developed here at a younger age, I think is very beneficial too, because you kind of have a lot of those things at place. So that way when you do come around maybe in your later years, and I can't speak to this, but maybe you look back on your life and you go, wow, I've achieved kind of the things that I wanted to achieve, and I'm enjoying this process.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think that unfortunately, we build tolerance in life and come to accept that it's all about what you prioritize, okay? And if you prioritize getting married at this age and starting to build a family and getting a house, and that's really what you know will make you feel fulfilled, like, go do that, right? But I think that your 20s are such a unique period where it's like, work a job for a year and then quit and find another. You know what I mean? Or financially invest into your dreams, because it was not cheap to publish this book. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
I
I can
had to
only imagine.
save up money from my 9 to 5. And then upon quitting that 9 to 5, use that money to invest in writing this book. But the goal right now is to publish a book every year, at least until I'm 30. That'll be 7 books by the time I'm 30. Only 30 years old. If you start now working towards your dreams, think about how freaking far you're going to be by the time that you're 30 years old. There's a lot of examples that I give in my book. I talk about Mr. Beast, I talk about Matt Rife, I talk about Alex Hormozy, and all of these guys are considered to be successful in their relative fields. One of them is a business owner, one of them is a YouTuber, the other is a comedian, right? And I don't take a deep dive, but I share a bit of their history, and all of them have been doing their respective fields for 10 plus years. And it's like, okay, everything that you want to do in life, or the passions that you have in life, if you want to actually create something out of it, I really encourage people to have a 10-year mindset about it. I'm not expecting anything to come out of this first book. All I expected from it was I actually did it and wrote a book. I learned how to write and publish a book, and I've started to create the connections with people who are in the writing and publishing industry. Now, do I expect 10 years from now that one of my books pops off? Yes, because I've been doing it for 10 years. I've put in so much time, effort, I've iterated, and I've kept it going for 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that what you touched on earlier too was just getting started. Mm-hmm. Just making those efforts to actually move forward with something.
And that's so how I got into this is I was working a 9 to 5 in Virginia, and I was working a job that was in the field that I graduated with my degrees, right? And then I was feeling lost. I was feeling empty. I didn't know what direction I wanted my life to head in. I picked up the phone. I called my mom. I said, "Can I move back home and write a book?" And she was silent on the other end, literally silent. It was the last thing that she was expecting to hear from me. I literally had been out of the house for a year. I am financially independent, like all these different things. And then she suddenly gets a call from her daughter that her daughter wants to move back in to write a book. And I was like, please, I have a plan. Like, I've thought about this, da, da, da. And my mom was like, we're going to have to think about it. We hang up. I had no plan. I literally had no plan. I flat out lied to my mom and telling her that I had a plan. And it took my parents 2 weeks to come back to me and tell me their answer of whether or not I could move back into them and write this book. Luckily, they said yes. And I never take for granted the opportunity that they have given me to move back in, to not have to worry about things financially, and to be able to completely devote myself and invest myself into writing this book. But I think that because of how I present myself on social media, and because of the fact that I've written a book, which is considered to be like a really big accomplishment, I think people perceive me in such a way that I have my life together. But I was literally just like crying a week ago because I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 months. You know what I mean? And that's how your 20s are. Literally month to month, things change. You don't know where you're going to be in the next year. And that is scary and hard and stressful, but it's also exhilarating. You literally have so many options and your potential is so limitless. And that's what I really just need everybody to understand and to take advantage of.
Yeah, you have a lot of vigor at a young age, and you can use that to your advantage. You can channel it into things that are beneficial to you, because I think in your book you said the only constant is yourself.
Yeah.
But even then, it's I'm going to get a little philosophical here, but it's the changeless state, or it's, how do I say this? The constant changing state of changelessness. It's it's a jumble of words, but anyways, you yourself are constantly changing, but that's the constant.
Yeah.
So the constant is change. And I think that's actually what you said in your book.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, I've come to realize that nobody is going to support my work as much as I do. No one's going to be my biggest cheerleader as much as I have to be. No one is going to put in the time, the effort, the resources into making my dreams of being a well-known author more than I am, right? So that's why I said, like, at the end of the day, you only have yourself. And that's why it is so important to focus on who you are becoming, and if you are aligning your thoughts, your words, your actions with the person who makes your dreams a reality, right? And I think that's like, it's so not talked about, like the person that you should become or the person that you should work towards being. It's really only talked about the path that you should follow to get from point A to point B. And then all the while you forget about you and the fact that, are you even made to be the person to walk this path?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you touched on a really good point there too, considering the fact that when it comes to choosing the path that you go down, that it's not so much the path, but it's a person. So what you're saying, and I would like for you to elaborate on this as well, is that you don't necessarily need to know exactly where you're going, but you just need to try to understand the person that you want to be, or the type of person that would be an author in your case, or the type of person that would be a father or mother at this age, depending on your goals. Right. Obviously, that's depends person to person, but how are you going to get there is not so much a question as opposed to what you do day to day.
Right, exactly. And that's so when I moved back in with my parents, they're like, hey, you need to write out a plan, and, we're going to check up on you and see how you're doing on that plan, making sure that you're kind of hitting these milestones. The plan that I set out for myself in August of 2023 is not at all how it went. Okay. It's literally just so funny. It's like, okay, well, that didn't happen. That didn't go this way. That actually happened this way. It's like, it literally did not happen. But what did happen is I was like, okay, if I want to be an author, what are the qualities of an author? Well, they write every day. So I have to be the type of person who writes every day. And what else about an author? Well, they make connections with people in the publishing industry. So how do I start being the type of person who makes connections and who is friendly and who introduces herself and talks about her work and things like that? So I really started to realize, and I really, reflecting and kind of writing out this book, realized that COVID taught me this a lot, because I don't know how COVID affected your life, but
very greatly. I changed my major.
Yeah, well, and
at
that's
the very least.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, if anything, COVID is a huge example of how, like, the path that we thought we were going to be on, because COVID happened while we were in college, is not at all how things ended up being. But focusing on who you wanted to become as a person, you could at least be like, okay, well, am I doing the things that, someone that I'm proud to become would be doing right now?
Yeah, I think too that you touched on a really important point there as well. The idea of the plan, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I understand why your parents made you write a plan. They want to make sure that you actually are trying to move towards a goal. For sure. And that makes sense. But what the plan doesn't always, well, I mean, never, and nothing really ever goes to plan. No. And you know, something that really irks me, I'm sure you've heard this before, but you get asked, well, what's your plan B? Yeah. It's like,
there is no plan A. Why would there be a plan B?
That's the thing, is it's always, what's your plan B? And I mean, in some cases, that's a very good thing to have, right? If your job falls through, you need something to fall back on. Financially, you need to be stable, so maybe you have to have some sort of backup plan for that. And that's totally understandable. But to expect that you just have plan A through Z for every single thing that happens in your life is kind of ridiculous. And I don't like the idea of having a plan B, or at least I don't call it a plan B myself. Maybe I just have things that this is kind of my backup or something like that. But even then, what happens when your backup falls through? You know, what do you do?
Yeah, and I think that also a lot of people's plan A's are not actually what they want for their life.
No, it's a glorified version of what you would perceive as success.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, so where do your dreams come into play? Are your dreams plan B? Are they plan C? Are they not even in the plan because you've lost sight of them and you don't know what they are?
That's a very good point that you bring up, that where is your dreams in there, right? Yeah. Because we're talking about this idea of a plan A, plan B, plan Q. Right. You know, what about the dream? Yeah. Where does that fit in there? Yeah. Because if your plan A doesn't fall through, or if your plan A falls through, do you just give up on that dream? Right. And I think that's a very important thing, is that we're always talking about having a plan. And one of my favorite quotes now, I think it's Mike Tyson. He says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Or wait, no, that's also in your book, isn't it?
I did not put that in
my
book. No,
okay.
But...
Well, sorry, my mind
You really wanted it.
I really wanted it. It's okay. You can use that for your content.
Right.
But no, you know, the idea that when you get hit with life, that, you know, you always have this plan. And I feel like in martial arts, and I apologize for going into this, but it's a great example, because when you stop to think about what the other person is going to do, and in this analogy, we'll call it life. If you stop to think about what life is going to throw at you, then by the time you actually turn around to react, or make your plan to react, because that's the issue. That's what martial arts has taught me, is don't make a plan. Like, live in the moment. Yeah. Because if you try to make a plan, you're going to get knocked on your ass. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that very much applies to your dreams. Mm-hmm. If you have this plan and it falls through, well, what do? Do you just give up?
Well, and that's the thing, is like, I am such a planner. Like, I'm a type A person. I'm very organized. Like, everything's in my Google Calendar. I have to-do list every day. So I am very much a planner. But as I have gotten older, I've realized that sometimes the plan can work against you and make you so tunnel vision on one way of doing something that you have perceived for one reason or the other that it's the best way to do it, that you don't even see the opportunities that are lying about you, or see the alternatives or the ways that you can pivot and actually get to whatever your goal is more efficiently or more effectively, or, you know, more successfully, whatever. It's so easy to be so hyper-focused on the plan that you don't even realize that there's different opportunities around you, better opportunities around you.
I agree. The idea that you're so hyper-focused on that plan detracts from your ability to actually do anything. It's almost debilitating. Yeah. Keeps you in one place. And I feel like when I first started Muay Thai and sparring, I would always be like, okay, we're in the clinch. Now when he throws this knee, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to sweep him. Every time I do that, I never end up doing it. Yeah. Rarely does it ever work out. Yeah. Because in that same time, when I'm getting ready to grab the exact knee that I want to grab to sweep him, I've received 5 knees to the gut before that. Right. And that's exactly the analogy for life, really. Because if you sit there and you wait for this plan to work out, it's probably not going to.
And that's the thing, is like, it's not about having a plan where you eliminate all the obstacles. It's about having the ability to overcome the obstacles time after time after time after time. Because I don't care how good you are at whatever your craft is or whatever your dream is. I don't care if you have been modeling cars for 10 plus years and you're considered a master modeler or whatever. I don't even know if that title exists, but like you're so good at it, you're never going to be at a point where you're not going to have obstacles in your way of reaching whatever the next milestone is or hitting whatever the next goal is. So it's not about coming up with a plan that eliminates all the obstacles, but it's about being the type of person who can endure all of the obstacles that are going to come your way and stay and know in your heart of hearts that your dreams and your passions and your purpose are still worth fighting for despite all of the obstacles that you are facing now and that you are going to continue to face.
I agree. And I think a lot of what happens to us is extremely unpredictable. I mean, think about, I'm not sure if you felt the effects of this, but I know people that have, but with the current state of the world and the economy with war and also the mass layoffs that have happened, you know, you can't really predict those types of things, you know? So how do you tell someone, like, what's your plan B? Like, you just lost your job. What's your plan B? Well, I don't think that's the best thing to say. I think the best thing to say is maybe, okay, what can we do in this situation? How can I get back on my feet?
How can we pivot?
Exactly.
You know, what other opportunities can we create for ourselves in this situation?
Yeah. And I think that you have a really good quote in your book that touches on this idea of making sure that you become the person that achieves those dreams. And I'll read it. And you said, most people's dreams go unfulfilled not because the dream wasn't clear enough or because the path didn't lead them to it, but because they never became the person to accomplish those dreams in the first place. So it's more the process and how you choose to achieve those dreams is what you're saying.
I mean, if your dreams are your real dreams, then you probably think about them frequently. Like, let's be honest. You know what I mean? You probably fantasize about them.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, right. Like, if they are really your dreams and what you want for your life, you're probably constantly thinking about them. So it's definitely not the fact that the dreams aren't clear because you probably know exactly what you want, right? And it's also not the path because although there are obstacles that will come in your way and your path will diverge in directions that you never anticipated, like you will eventually get there if you work your booty off and you keep yourself focused, right? Like the path isn't the problem. I really do think that it's like people do not prepare themselves for the type of person it takes to step into the role of whoever it is that makes their dreams a reality.
Exactly. And I think that for me, kind of an analogy would be, well, I guess I'll ask you. You're an author now, but let's say you wanted to be a doctor, right? Because you knew that it was a secure path, or something along the lines of maybe a surgeon or something like that. And I have friends and family who are in those positions, but for you, is that the best option, right? Because are you willing to make those sacrifices to put yourself in the best position to where you can get that? Right. And I know I've known people who have waited till their 30s to be able to get to that point where they can actually go and study or continue working to those dreams after over a decade. And I think that is truly the ultimate goal, is to become the person who can deal with all of that to get to where they want to be. Because it's not just getting knocked down once or twice or being told no or little things happening. It's the idea that you may be also waiting years and years. And when you want to give up, you can't. And I'm sure you felt that with your writing in your book and, you know, all the changes that you've gone through in the past few years.
And that's why, like, there's a few things that I want to comment on what you just said. First and foremost, like, in my head, I'm already a world-renowned author, right? And some people might call that delusion, but that is okay with me. Like, I'm okay with being a little delulu and thinking that I can actually reach these levels of success that I have in my mind.
Well, you have to be.
Well, and that's, oh yeah, totally. You have to have a delusional level of self-belief and self-confidence to actually make these things become reality. But it's also like, if I believe right now that I'm a world-renowned author, then I'm going to conduct myself in such a way that I am.
Yeah.
I will take my work as a new author seriously, and I will convince and help articulate to others why my book is prominent and why other people should read it. You know what I mean? Like, I will conduct myself in a manner of respect and authority online.
Yeah.
Like, I won't be posting random stuff that it doesn't matter because I only have 200 followers and it's just my family. Like, no, I'm in my head, I'm a world-renowned author, so I'm going to be posting insightful things. I'm going to not make a fool of myself online. I'm
Very
going to take
important.
myself seriously because in my head, I'm already there.
Yeah. And, everything that you do has an effect, right? Because in the book, you talk about the words that you use. There's I think there's almost a whole chapter where you just talk about like what you say to people and what you say to yourself. Is very important.
It's huge.
And you say, you have an instance, if you don't mind me bringing it up, but at your job, you said that you called yourself, when you were offered a leadership position, you flat out said, oh, well, I'm a bossy person, so I can handle that. And you didn't even mean to say that. Yeah. But because you had been telling yourself for so long, I'm just a bossy person, that was what you envisioned yourself, and it just came out. Yeah. And, now you take the flip side of that and you're telling yourself, I'm a world-renowned author. Well, when that happens down the line, then it won't be like this big revelation where, oh my God, New York Times bestseller. I never saw this coming. And that's another point you mentioned in your book, is that it's, rarely is it this big revelation of, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. Right. No, it's
you worked for it.
You worked for it.
Yeah, you literally prepared yourself to get to that moment. So when you reach that moment, it's like halfway expected, because you're like, yeah, I've wanted to be a New York Times bestselling author. I've been acting like one. I've been writing like one. I've been speaking with other people and trying to promote my book like one. Like, in my head, I'm already am one. And you touched on the words that we speak to ourselves and the words that others speak over us. And when you reference the part in my book where I talk about how bossy was always a characteristic that was spoken over me, because I am the oldest child, I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family, and I'm very authoritative. I know how to direct people and how to delegate work. And so when I had gotten this job and was speaking to them, they were like, so how are you feeling? Are you feeling good in your leadership role? Yada, yada, yada. And I was like, yeah, I'm feeling good because I'm bossy. And I'm like, no, that's not at all what I meant to say. But those are the words that had been spoke over me my whole life. And I had started to internalize them. So like, really being careful about you often may not be able to control the words that are spoken over you by others. But understanding how those words impact you and how you live your life because of the words of what other people are speaking over you, and then how that directs your personal internal narrative, is really important to take into consideration when you're trying to figure out the type of person that makes your dreams a reality.
We will be right back. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. As a martial artist, our philosophy and way of life goes beyond the walls of where we train. As an artist of life, self-expression is the name of the game. What better way to express your style than with streetwear that tells others who's in town? Master artist and calligrapher Yasuko, owner of Dragon Ika Calligraphy Art, has everything you need. Whether it's hand-painted calligraphy shirts, custom-made Japanese calligraphy necklaces, artistic drinkware, or seasonal specials, Dragon Ika has everything you need to express your appreciation for life and art. Support local business and check out Dragon Ika calligraphy art on Instagram at dragon_Ika, that's Ika, IKKA, or visit their website at www.dragonika.com. Use code NEWHUMAN10 to get 10% off all merchandise. And now back to the show. So I wanted to pivot for a moment and talk about the idea of the past, present, and future self, which is a recurring theme in your book, which is kind of what you base the whole premise of developing your future self on, and where you in the present time should fit into that. Yeah. So let's start with the past self. So when you're reflecting on yourself, and I feel I have done this before myself, where I overthink my past and then I feel like, oh my gosh, I need to do something about it in the future, when in reality that has been long gone. Why is it so hard to let go of the past? Do you see it as maybe like an excuse for the future actions? And it's obviously holding us back, but how do you constructively reflect on your past? Because we always talk about reflecting, but how do we actually use it in a beneficial way so that way we can move forward?
Yeah.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, for sure. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to remember all the things that he's asking.
Past, present, future, and we'll start there.
Okay. So a lot of the premise of my book is about the relationship between your past, present, and future self. Because as I started to look at my life, I realized I was a very backwards biased person. And that's what I refer to it as in my book. And what I mean by that is I was constantly looking towards my past as an indication of where I am today and where I will be tomorrow. But I started to realize that looking to my past was really holding me back, and in a sense was it was kind of like having one foot in my past and one foot in my present, so then I could never really fully prepare for the future in the way that I really wanted to. So I found myself in, destructive habits and doing repeated behavior that I didn't want to do, and really just kind of staying stuck in the past. And what I realized is that it's so easy to reflect on your past, because it's already happened. Right? Like, it's really scary to think about your future because you literally have no idea what's going to happen and you can't anticipate what's going to happen. So it's way easier to look towards your past because it's already happened and you already
certain.
Yeah, it's certain. Well, we have some biases about our past.
Well,
like,
true.
don't even get me
Yeah,
we won't even get into that. But yeah, our past in a way is certain. It's done. We know what happens, and our future is so unknown that it's like, okay, let me just redirect my focus to my past. But I started to realize that being so focused on my past was because your present self is built from your past self. And if you start to realize that you need to let go of some aspects of your past, it can feel like you're letting go of parts of yourself. And that's really hard to come to terms with. It's really hard to mourn. This is how I reference it in my book, is it's really hard to mourn the loss of a life you once knew. It doesn't matter if your past was, good or bad, and if you're happy or sad that you have moved on or that you are now in the present or somewhere different. It's still hard to let go of who you thought you would be by now, what you thought your life was going to look like.
Truly, I feel like the idea that the past for me is also sort of, it can be seen as a place of comfort, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know that it's happened. When I was in college, the constant exams and everything, the change of the semesters, was an indication for me of time passing. Mm-hmm. Whereas once you get out of school, I almost had this like panic where I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it's going to be like for the rest of my life. Because, I didn't have any of those new life experiences that would come in the future, in the coming months and over the course of the next year. So everything felt extremely comfortable, even though I may not have been happy, it was comfortable because it was what I knew, and I didn't have to go out and try to do different things. I didn't have to come and meet people for a podcast that I had in, like, in some neutral space. I didn't have to go out and try to express myself while also being nervous of the fact that, this is my first time talking to someone. I didn't have to do those things. And now I put myself through that because I love it. I enjoy getting to talk to people in this manner and like getting to know who you are as a person. I mean, I feel like for the short time that we've been talking, I feel like, I don't know, I've known you for years now. And that's a very powerful thing, right? As opposed to if I'm kind of conceited in myself, and it's like I see you and I'm like, oh, hi, how's it going? Like the conversation that I can actually hold now with people because I'm so much more comfortable and want to be in the present. I want to be here, right? That's the difference, is that the reason I don't think about my past as much, or the reason I don't dwell on it, that's the word I'm looking for, is dwelling on it, is because I want to be here. I want to be here in the now. Like you don't have to be here, right? You can leave. I'm not holding you hostage here, and neither are you. But I want to be here in the present, and that to me is really like what separates the past from the present. And that's a hard thing to develop, though. That's something that I'm still working on. That's something that affected me for a long time. And I'm sure, I mean, as you said, it affected you too. But, now that I've developed sort of that way to become like the person in the present, that's completely changed even my outlook on life.
And that's what I started to realize, that when I was thinking about my past or situations that had happened in the past, or, you start to have those in hindsight moments, the 2020, like if I could have gone back and said this differently or done this differently, like then where would my life be? And it's like none of those realities that you're imagining in your head exist. There's only one reality that exists, and it's the one that you're living and perceiving right now. And so I realized that like constantly dwelling on the past, and even it came to like looking at old pictures and going through yearbooks and watching old videos. Like that was a way that I dwelled in the past as well. And in a way it was to hide myself or to try to forget my present, because at the time I was working a 9-to-5 that I didn't like, that I was miserable at. I was living in a state that I lived in Virginia at the time. I'm from Ohio, and so it was over 6 hours away from my family. I had no support system, so the only way that I could escape my present, my miserable present, was to think about my past and happier times or better times in my past. But I realized that was not helping me progress as a person or develop into the life that I actually wanted to live. And that's what is like, there is a fine line, and I talk about this in my book, of reflecting on your past to try to break it down and understand it, versus reflecting on your past to kind of shed light on where you should go or the direction you should start heading into. And I think that we, especially in society nowadays, is we try to break down our past so much to try to understand where we are today, instead of just saying, actually, hey, what do I want my future to look for? Like, what do I want my future to look like? And how does that impact my today? You know what I mean? Like, how does that impact who I am today?
Yeah, because there's no fun in like, I mean, it's like, I think of it as like sitting around a campfire telling stories, right? Like, wow, that story is so cool, but like, what's it like to live that? It's the idea of the comfort place, being by this fire, listening to the story, so revisiting your past, but then you're not actually living it. And the idea that, for me, I guess I keep associating the past with like sort of this comfort, because it's very easy to sit in your room and just like you said, look at old videos or look at pictures. And I feel like looking at old pictures, especially if like, it's with people who maybe aren't in your life anymore, that can have a huge psychological effect, especially if you're sitting there revisiting those photos for a long time.
Or like
because
the snap memories that come up like
oh,
every
yeah.
year, like 2 years ago
Yeah.
today, you were with your roommate and things like that.
2 years ago today, you had Panda Express with
Yeah,
your
right.
ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, and
It's
you're like, oh my God.
it's like, oh man, I forgot to delete that one. But you know, I completely agree with you, and I think that the idea of focusing so much on the past is just it's awful when you look at it in the perspective of this is who is defining me now, because what's defining you now is the person that acts in the present to help your future.
Yeah. And I talk about, so in the same way that we're talking about how we use the past to escape our present, you can also use your future to escape your present. And through fantasizing about what you want your life to be or what you wish your life was or things like that. So I do a whole chapter and I talk about the difference of living in your future versus living for your future. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand is like, I haven't just switched from trying to escape my present. I used to try to escape my present by living in the past, and now I'm just escaping my present by living in the future. But what I'm trying to express to people and help them understand is that you can live for your future and still live in the present. Because living in the present is the only reality that you should be living in. But instead of living for your past and kind of revisiting those memories and trying to figure out where things went wrong and what would have happened if things went differently, you can live for your future and direct the course of your future through who you're becoming today.
I was listening to another podcast, Art of Manliness, one day, and they had on a person who was talking about your future self. And this is kind of what reminds me of what you're talking about when you envision your future self as an escape. Because we see our future self as a different person, right? We see them as almost a stranger.
Yeah.
And there's this activity that they said to do. And you actually have an activity that's somewhat similar, which we'll get to here in a little bit. It's called the day one activity of like your future. We'll do an example later. But this idea is that you write a letter to your future self, and then you write a letter from your future self to your present self. And that allows you, and I did it. I had been wanting to do it for a while. I had it down in my notes. I was like, this is on my to-do list. And I kind of got around to it. And I kind of like, in the moment, I was like, I'll just do it. It's whatever.
Right.
Letter to my future self was kind of like, hey, hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing this, and that. Hope you've like stayed on course. Like, hope you are the person that I want to be. Yeah. And then my future self letter to my present was like, it was kind of different. Like as I was writing, I was like, it just like I had a weird experience where I was almost like, I almost felt like we were like, it was like a not as much a stranger and more of like a relative speaking to me. So it's like still blood related, but maybe not exactly myself. But I felt that sense of, hey man, like it's okay. Like we're doing well. And I was telling myself like, don't worry about all the little shit that doesn't matter. Yeah. Like I was actually telling myself, and as I'm writing this, I'm like, it was this weird kind of almost like Inception, like, like I can't explain it, but it was kind of a powerful activity in the sense that it gave me the actual feeling. I think that's another thing is that like the emotions that we have a strong impact, and it gave me the actual feeling that I was a part of myself and that we weren't two separate people.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about that in my book. I think that we have a stronger connection to our past self because it's already happened, and oftentimes we've replayed those situations and scenarios in our head so much that we're so familiar with it and we have such a disconnected relationship with our future self because it hasn't happened yet, and we're not really sure what's going to happen or how we're going to get to the quote-unquote end goal that we have, that we end up completely ignoring that relationship to our future self. And that's why in my book I compare our future to a photo mosaic. And a photo mosaic is one of those pictures where from a distance you see an image, but as you walk up closer to the picture, you see that that big picture you were looking at is actually made out of 1,000 smaller images. And what people don't realize is that literally what you are doing today is those thousands of smaller images of the bigger picture of your life and your future and what you want for yourself. And yeah, sure, like after this podcast, I'm going to go to a cafe and work on some things. Like, is that really going to impact the trajectory of my future? No. But the discipline to go and work after doing a 3-hour podcast, the integrity of knowing, like, this is what I need to do and I'm going to be the person who does, like, these are the things that are shaping your future. And it's like, okay, I could probably just go home after this and chill for the rest of the day because I feel like I've gotten enough work done for the day. But it's like, no, you got to push yourself to be better. You have got to push yourself because it really does add up in the grand scheme and in the bigger picture of your life.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, this is obviously work, but it's kind of fun, you know? Sure. Like you find the fun things in it. Like I get to talk to new people. I get to know people who I already know even better. Mm-hmm. And it's a good time. And sure, we have to take the time and do the work, mm-hmm. but we still have fun.
Everything. You have to take the time to do the work in everything.
Yeah.
Literally everything is going to require work. Anything good does not come easy in life. And that's the thing is like, I made the connection early on when I actually wrote the manuscript of this book in 60 days. And to write the manuscript in 60 days, I had to write 1,200 usable words. I kept referring it as usable words because sometimes you write things and you don't even put it in the book, right?
Just a bunch of mess.
Yeah. And so I was literally at my desk. I would wake up, I would go straight to my desk. I'd be working on my laptop. You know, I'd go work out, I'd go eat, whatever. But I was at my desk 24/7. And I realized I was like, this is the part of the job that I hated about my 9-to-5. I literally hated about like sitting at a desk, but I'm sitting at a desk now. And the difference is that I'm doing something that I love and that I enjoy. And it literally doesn't matter that I'm still doing an equivalent amount of work or I'm working more. I'm literally working more on this book than I ever worked at my 9-to-5. That does not matter to me because I love what I'm doing and I'm enjoying the process and I have no expectations of the end result. That's the big thing too, because like I've already said that in my head, I'm a New York Times bestselling author, but I have no expectations of getting there or no pressure to. Well, maybe there is pressure because I want there to be like a healthy pressure on me. So then I kick my but I'm enjoying the process. And that's the thing is like, that is what is going to get you so much further in life. And not the fact that you can grind and you can work for 10 hours straight every single day without taking a vacation. That's not, screw that philosophy. What is going to actually get you to where you want to go is the fact that you are enjoying the process along the way and that your motivation or your end goal isn't some reputation, isn't some title, isn't some monetary goal. Like, I'm not saying that I want to be making millions off of this, but like I know that's unrealistic and not going to happen. And that's not the goal anyways. The goal is the fact that my younger self wanted to write a book. Yeah. The goal is the fact that I only have one life, that I could die tomorrow. People say, oh, you're motivated, you're hardworking. Like they tell me this all the time. It's like, no. All that I am is very, extremely, incredibly aware of the fact that I could not wake up tomorrow. Yeah. And too many people live life thinking that life is a guarantee. And it is not. Yeah. It is not. A month ago, my uncle unexpectedly passed away. And it has been, thank you. Again, early in this podcast, we talked about how life throws things at you and you never know. You just can't expect it. His death has completely blown up my life in a way that I could have never expected. And he died at 42. 42. Luckily, he had kids when he was young and his kids had kids when they were young. So he had 2 grandchildren. So he got to become a grandpa and things like that. But he's gone. Mm-hmm. He's done. His life is over. He has no more opportunities. He has no more chances at this. Yeah. And his death had only kind of compiled the thought that I already think about every day is the fact that You only live one life. So why are you laying in bed, scrolling on TikTok for 5 hours every day? Do you even realize that there is a life to be lived? Do you even realize that there are opportunities, that you have potential to change the world? I'll get off of my soapbox.
No, it's
now.
okay. No, it's good. For one, I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
But I think that there's two things that really touched on with me that I want to talk a little bit more about. And one of them was the idea of putting in the work every day. Mm-hmm. So I'll start there. Mm-hmm. The other one was about your idea of death and how important that is in living life. When it comes to actually getting work done, mm-hmm. I have found that, much like you, ever since I graduated college, I'm doing way more.
Yeah.
I'm like exercising. Like, for example, when I was in college, I did powerlifting. Mm-hmm. I still do powerlifting, but I work out 4 days a week, and that was it. Didn't do any cardio or anything. And oh my gosh, I was using so much caffeine to just to do that. Yeah. But now I work out. I do some sort of physical activity, whether it's a mile run, whether it's a full lifting workout, or if it's like going to martial arts class. Mm-hmm. I do some sort of physical activity almost every day. Mm-hmm. And I don't rely on caffeine as much. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm almost confused because I feel like I became almost dependent on it. And now here I am, and like, I will get done with like Muay Thai, and I'm like, no, I want to do it again. Yeah. After like an hour of like sweating my ass off and literally like laying on the ground because I can't move, like, why do I want to do that again? And I feel like, and sometimes I feel like I can always give more, right? Yeah. That's the thing, is like, even after that, I'm like, you know what? That wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Yeah. Let's do it again. And that's the funny thing, is I feel like sometimes when you actually just do the work, you just become more and more acclimated to it, to where you're like, you know, man, like, sure, that's hard, but like, the amount of payoff that sometimes I feel like get just from what I feel is like only a small amount of work can be kind of surprising sometimes. Just by like going and just doing something that I should be doing, like this podcast, like just the amount of like awesome things that have come of this. And, you know, I'm still very new into it, but I'm just like, it makes me want to do more, because I'm like, well, I've already only done this much and I've seen like this come out of it. That's cool. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to touch on was the part of death. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that death is something that is very prevalent. Mm-hmm. It happens every single day. People are born and die every single day. And, you know, there's kind of this idea with like the samurai and a lot of Eastern philosophy where like, I think Bruce Lee said, learn the art of dying. And that's like, you know, you can sit there and be like, well, that's a bunch of fluff. But in reality, what he's trying to say is that when you're basically already dead if you don't live, if you don't acknowledge that life is so fragile, and and I think it also means like dying, like letting parts of yourself, like, I don't want to say die, but like, you know, letting the bad things be replaced by the good, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's how you become a continuously better person, I feel like, is, you know, I feel like it's almost like you can, like the idea of the phoenix, like death and rebirth every single day. And that's kind of the thing that I think about, like, is, you know, each day is an opportunity. And I think to me, that's truly kind of what that idea of like the phoenix means, is not literal re-death and rebirth, mm-hmm, but the idea that every single day I'm granted with this new opportunity to do something great, this new opportunity to, even if I don't like solve global warming in the next week, like, I know that I get to talk to great people, that I'm going to, you know, that there's experiences that I don't know that are coming. Yeah. And you have a few quotes in your book about the idea of death, and I want to read them here because kind of a reminder to the essence of living, I guess you could say. This was a quote. You said, Lucius Annaeus Seneca, a famous philosopher, once said, "This is our big mistake, to think we look forward to death. Most of death has already gone. Whatever time has passed is owned by death." So death is also here in this case being looked at as time passed. So you're not even talking, you're talking about literal death, but you're also talking about you are dead if you're not taking advantage of the time that you have, because the idea of like free time and like more time, time is just a constant. Time doesn't stop. You don't gain or lose time. It's really finite when you think of it. And then another one that you had was Norman Cousins, prolific American journalist and author, once said, "The tragedy of life is not death, but what we let die inside of us while we live. Too many of us are letting our passions and dreams die within us as we sit in the waiting room of our lives. This is because of our dream to fantasy pipeline." And that's a direct quote from the introduction. That is another aspect that's another way to look at death, and the essence of, if you're not trying to actively achieve your dreams, then you are also dead in that manner. Yeah. Your creativity is dead. I feel like that's really what it means to live, is to not let all the things in life that come at you and may change you completely phase out your drive for life. I feel like. And in the same way that letting your dreams die and all the other things die, it really makes it clear that when you do die, or when that time comes to where you are getting closer to death, how will you feel? Do you want to have those regrets, or do you want to be like, man, that was fun?
Often ask myself, if I died today, if I died right now, would I be happy with how I lived my life? I often ask myself and reflect on that question. And it really is a good kind of reality check of like, hey, am I actually doing things in my day to day that if I were to die right now, I would be happy? And it's like, if I were to die today at the age of 23, even though I haven't reached some of the goals of, being New York Times bestselling author and all these different things, would I be happy and content with how I've lived my life thus far? Yes, because I am doing what I've always wanted to do. I am doing what I've always said I was going to do. And I'm putting my full heart and my full effort into it. And so thus I am satisfied. Now I don't want to, so knock on wood, please.
I don't want to die right now either. But to your point of your book, you've become the person that you wanted to become, and you're still in that ongoing process. But I agree with you. I think that, it's not that I'm looking forward to death by any means, but I definitely feel a sense of peace, a sense of a little bit more inner peace than I've had in the past few years of, this is who I am. I'm more content with that.
Yeah.
Because all the things in life, like jobs and money and all that stuff, I feel like it's very fluid, right? It ebbs and flows, And I think that to us, death is oftentimes scary. But when you look at like Buddhist principles and the way of the samurai is a huge thing. People love quoting samurai and like all these different things and like stoics and everything. But like, what does it really mean? Well, you have to understand that like at that time, for these people, they were, death was a very real thing. So, and that's why Japanese and a lot of Eastern countries adopted this idea of Buddhism, was because they had to deal with the reality of the world that they lived in. And the samurai believed, like that at any moment that could be it. Yeah. And sure, that sounds stressful, but at the same time, it's to get you to understand that like the actions that you make in the moment are the most important. And that, when you talk about death, it's finite. You can't come back and be like, oh wait, well I want to go back to that and like change that. And I feel like living your life in such a way that gives you the not only motivation but discipline to get up and actually try every single day, I feel like if we really tried to achieve that, the world might be a little bit of a different place.
And there was a section, I don't think it was going to be a whole chapter, but it was a section where I just talked about how I think most people are just zombies walking through their lives. But it didn't end up being in the final manuscript of my book. However, I really do believe that people are just letting life happen to them rather than directing the course that their life goes. And that's what we need to wake up and understand, is that a lot of us, I mean, when you're in school, you're just doing what you need to do to take the class, to pass the grade, get the grade, pass the class, to get the degree, to get the job, to get the promotion, to get the money, and then what? Like to what? To what end? Literally, to what end?
Like, what are you going to do with that money?
Yeah, how are you going to live your life in such a way that you're actually living life and not just letting life happen to you? And maybe, surely things are not in our control, right? Like we have such a small amount of control than we'd like to think that we do. But you do still have a certain amount of control over the direction that your life goes. So you need to do something about it. You need to do something about it instead of being a victim of your life and the things that are happening to you.
You know, you can't be a bystander in your life.
That's the thing. Like, sure, quote unquote, the end goal for me might be to be a New York Times bestselling author, but that's not what the like end reward or the fulfillment is. The fulfillment comes from being a first-time author and walking the journey of becoming a New York Times bestselling author. The fulfillment is not in the fact that I became a New York Times bestselling author, but in the fact that I got my first newsletter subscriber, right? And that I wrote daily for a newsletter for 5 years. You know what I mean? Or that I reached 500 copies sold of my first book. Like, those are really what feel the most rewarding, because like I said and wrote about in my book, is that when you really reach those big milestones of enlightenment or of becoming a New York Times best-selling author, whatever it is, it's partially expected because you've been working in your day-to-day to try to reach enlightenment, to try to become more aware of your surroundings, to try to live in the moment, to try to become a New York Times bestselling author, to work towards those little goals and those milestones and those achievements and things like that. So
there's something in your book that kind of points to this, and you say the answers for your future and direction you should take lie within yourself. They always have, and you just proved it. You have the ability to make your dreams come true by becoming the right person, and now you have an outline for who the right person is. So it's all within ourselves, right? And there's this idea of all knowledge is self-knowledge. That's something that I always try to remember. And like, what does that mean? Well, right, what you said, the answers are within you.
Mm-hmm. And we're scared to look within, first of all. And we also, like, I am fully aware that the concepts that I talk about in my book are not original. I'm fully aware that there are people who have written on the concept of your future self before.
There are.
You know what I mean?
But
the way that I present it,
exactly,
the perspective that I have lived life and applied them to my life, and how I talk about them to you guys in the audience that I'm trying to talk about, is what makes it different. And it's so easy to get caught up in the idea of like, I don't have an original idea, or like nothing is new, or it's hard to come up with something new. It doesn't matter. You can take something that's old, you can take something that everybody knows, but the fact that it's your perspective is what makes it important and is what is needed for other people to hear, because my book might resonate with a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people who might not resonate with it and who might not understand it and who it might not like really seep into and get to. But if they read another book that was about the future self but presented differently, then it might resonate with them. You know what I mean? So it's like, despite the fact that there are thousands of self-help authors out there, and that there are, thousands of books that readers could choose from. This is the path that I feel is the truest um, path and indication of what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. So I'm going to do it. And this path has, in becoming an author and doing this, has always been present in my life. It has always, it didn't just come to me one day and be like, oh, I should be an author. No, the love of reading and writing has literally been there since day one. You know what I mean? It was just a matter of me being honest enough with myself, being comfortable with spending time with myself, and asking the hard questions of, hey, you only have one life. You could die tomorrow. What do you want to be doing with this life? And I think that it's so, I think that nowadays it's so easy that when you do have time with yourself, you can really just kind of numb that time and numb yourself by entertainment, and ignore that time with yourself and take it for granted, and kind of see it as a bad thing that you're not hanging out with friends, or you don't have a significant other to spend your time with, or blah 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 blah, and not really take advantage of the time that you have with yourself to ask yourself the questions of, hey, am I living the life that I want to? Am I doing the things that are going to lead to a life that I want to live 5, 10, 20 years down the line? And is my life amounting to what I want it to amount to? And you're never going to find those answers if you don't find comfort in spending time with yourself, asking those questions, and being brutally honest with yourself with the answers.
There's no other Jade, right? There's no other person that's exactly like you. So you bring to the table a very unique perspective. And why is that important, right? Well, I think it's important because so often in our life we're told, oh, you're just a number. But I feel like what you do and how you pursue your dreams and seeing yourself as like a unique person, I think about like all the skills you have. How do you become an asset for yourself, right? As opposed to just another number, like,
or becoming an asset to a company.
Yes.
Like, how do you become an asset to your life,
yes,
rather than just becoming an asset to a company and to whatever their corporation and their goals and their, monetary, which is always the motivator. How do you become an asset in your own life? How do you live your own life? How do you direct the course of your life and not just let life happen to you?
Yeah, and there's two other quotes that I wanted to mention here, that I thought were great too. And you said, it's not about being the best, it's about outlasting everyone else. And I think that one spoke to me so much, because it's that idea that when you're just about to give up, that's when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
Or I think for myself, in a more personal example, is like sparring for martial arts. Muay Thai. If I'm sparring and we go 10 rounds or whatever, listen, everybody who has been training for the same amount of time is going to be just as dead by the 5th or 6th round as you are. But what matters is not if I get knocked down, I'm so tired that I can like barely move. The point is that I don't stop.
Yeah.
The point is that not trying to be like, oh, I can outlast everyone else, but it is that idea that maybe I can outlast what I thought that I could.
Yeah.
And
personally. And
that,
beat your own assumptions of yourself.
And that, to me, I think that's what really spoke to me in that part of your book, was where you say outlasting everyone else. I sort of saw that as like an internal, like, how do I prove to myself that I can actually outlast everyone else, in quotations, including myself?
Yeah, including what you thought you could do and how long you could last. Yeah, because listen, I know that I'm not the most profound writer. I know that I'm not the most, like, it's not, writing somewhat comes naturally to me, but I know that I'm not the best writer out there. I'm not, spewing Shakespeare level crap out here, okay?
There's
And
good
neither
things
would
like
I want
that.
to. Yeah.
There's good
Yeah.
things like that.
But it's like I just have to outlast everybody else, and eventually I'll get there. Because I know that there's, first of all, I see my success with such a far, far, far off timeline. It's not a, hey, my parents only gave me 1 year to move back home and write this book. So if I don't become a successful author, a world-renowned author in 1 year, then I'm doomed. It wasn't meant for me. No, it's
Yeah.
like there's this idea of the 80-20 rule. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but that 80% of your success comes from 20% of the work that you do. So it's like if I write a book every year for the next 10 years, so that would make me 33 years old, publishing 10 books. That would mean that 80% of my success is going to come from two of those books is going to bring about all of my success. And it's like, okay, well, in my mind, then baby, it is a game of volume. And it is a game of how quickly can I churn out these books while still having them be quality. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to diminish the quality just to publish a book.
Oh, yeah.
But how quickly can I have this concept that I've recently come up with, and it's like, it's the process of going from the idea to the implementation to the iteration.
Yeah.
So it's, hey, how fast can you come up with this idea? How fast can you implement it? And then third, how fast can you iterate on that idea and circle back and keep going and keep going and keep going? Because what is important is not that you hit a home run the first time that you bat, but is that after trying, you average pretty well. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to hit a home run the first time, but I'm trying to hit a few okay. Maybe I shouldn't have said a baseball reference because I know nothing about what actual good baseball is.
It's okay.
But it's like, okay, I don't know what a good batting average is, but it's not the fact that I hit a home run on the first time, but that I have a decent batting average overall.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about overall, right? I mean, some batting averages, like a good batting average is like, what, like 30%?
Okay.
Like, that's pretty decent.
And that's so low.
Exactly.
Like, in school, you're trying to get 100% on exams.
Yes.
You're trying to get 90% on papers. And it's like, well, actually, really, to be good, you just got to get 30%.
Exactly. I mean, like a 0.38 batting average. I mean, that's
okay.
in like a professional
I'm glad you know.
league,
I'm glad you
that's pretty good.
Okay.
And like, I think the average is probably, I don't know because it's been a while, but think about all the pitches that you get, and that's an average, right? So there's some days that you may not hit anything. There's some days you might hit everything. But kind of the same idea with that 80-20 rule. And then you go a step further and you say, like, how many home runs are you hitting? Well, there's like people who probably don't even really hit home runs.
Yeah.
And it's like that idea that 20%, like when you put it in that perspective, it makes a lot of sense that you're saying, like, out of the 10 books that you publish, 2 of them are going to, you're not telling me that you expect to be an overnight wonder with one book. And there is a chance that, that could happen.
Right.
But you can't rest your career on that.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of relates really well to this one quote that you have that I really like. And it's close to the middle end of the book. And you say, some people want it and some people live it. And I think that just speaks to everything that you said, that it's not, it relates exactly with the idea of outlasting yourself and everyone else, but also the idea that you're living the actual process. You're living the person. You're not just saying, oh, I want this. And I think that's a huge difference.
And that's what I think that, like, I think about teachers a lot. I had a lot of friends who were in education in college, and it's like, okay, they teach you how to lesson plan, they teach you classroom management, they teach you X, Y, Z. But do they teach you how to have patience with students? Do they teach you how to develop students' confidence? Do they teach you what it is to be a teacher? You know what I mean? Like, they can teach you kind of the logistics of teaching, but do they teach you what it is to be a teacher? And I think that's what it is in life. It's like, you can really want something. You can want your wildest dreams to come true in the deepest, 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 deepest part of yourself. But if you're not living your life as if you want your dreams to come true, then they're not going to come true. I'm sorry to break it to you. And that's just a reality that we all have to face. It's like, if you're not putting in the work, if you're not, and listen, by putting in the work, I don't mean 100% every day. You need to be putting in the work consistently every day, whether that means yesterday it was 90% and today it's 50% and tomorrow it's 30%, but the next day it's 80%. Like it's going to, it's going to fluctuate. But overall, like if you zoom out and see the bigger timeline of your life, you're going to see that it was an exponential graph that was heading in the right direction. So on the day-to-day, you need to be putting in the effort. It doesn't have to be max effort, and it can't be max effort when you find out that your uncle unexpectedly dies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like the point here is that you are living every day, A, as if it's your last, B, as if you are in control of what is happening to your life, and life isn't just happening to you. And C, you need to be a person who lives it out in their day-to-day what they want for their future. It is not enough just to want your dreams to become reality. You have to actually live as if your dreams are a reality and as if they have a potential to become reality. And you realize that your life is the photo mosaic made out of the thousands of actions and decisions and habits and mindsets and thoughts and words that you have today, and not just one stroke of luck, because that is not how it goes.
Not just one straight line. That's why I really like the photo mosaic model that you use for the idea of your future, because it allows you to think that, it's kind of like a puzzle. Maybe you're putting all these tiny little pieces together rather than A, B, C, D, I'm going down this timeline, because that's not how it works. Because you also talk in your book at some point about pivoting and how difficult it is to pivot, and maybe you should be pivoting and you're just not. Yeah. And I mean, you have so many good quotes in this book. I also want to touch on two others. Okay. So you say, speak like someone who's successful and wire your brain to think like someone who's successful. And this kind of reminds me of, I keep referring, I'm a huge fan of Bruce Lee. That's okay. In the movie Enter the Dragon, there's a scene where like he's talking to this master and he's supposed to be like, what do you do in this situation? And he goes like, blah, 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 blah. And at the end he goes, it hits all by itself. So he's like, I do not hit, it hits all by itself. Basically meaning that he's not even thinking about like the situation, he's just acting in the moment. And I think that relates so well to this, because you're talking about becoming the person, and you're going to do, when you become that person, you're going to do all the things that you need to do to get yourself in that good position. And it's almost like, it's the idea of like trusting yourself, right? It's pretty amazing when you think of it in that way. Like, I do not hit, it hits all by itself. That's the same thing that you're saying with choosing to become that person, because you have to trust yourself that you're going to do the work, that you're going to do those things that you need to do.
And that's the thing too, is like, once you have reached whatever idea of success is in your mind, once you have reached it, if you are not prepared, and if you are not the person who takes that success and handles it well and eloquently and with grace, then your success is going to come crumbling down. You will literally fail in the face of success if you're not the type of person who is to be successful and who is to handle that success. So it's like, I'm really careful about how I speak. I don't cuss, and that's a personal preference, but it's like, because when I'm at the top and when I'm successful, that's not how I want to influence people. I don't want to be calling my friends my bitches, because my friends aren't my bitches. Like, that even feels weird coming out of my mouth, because I literally never cuss, but it's like, I would never refer to my friends that way, even if it's in a term of endearment, because that is not what the type of person who achieves success looks like in my mind. So I'm not going to wait until 20 years down the future when I am successful to stop cussing. I'm going to start now, because it's like, I'm not going to be able to build authenticity in the way that I speak if I'm trying to not cuss, but I've been cussing for 20 years. You know what I mean? So it's like, it literally is, you need to be thinking about how does an author approach this? How would an author do this? How does an author live her life outside of writing? What does she do with her time? And it's like, okay, well, that's what I need to be doing today with my time, regardless of whether or not I'm an author, regardless of whether or not I have that success. It is what I need to be doing today, because that is what is going to bring me to that success and have me prepared for that success in such a way that I am able to absorb it in a way that positively impacts my life rather than destroys my life.
Yeah. And there was there was one more quote relating to that. It was taken from your book, but it's actually a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. And that is like, that's such a good quote. I mean, it's basically the synopsis of your book,
Yeah.
becoming your future self.
And that's it. People don't realize that who your future self is and who they become is due to and a result of what you're doing today, how you're thinking today, how you use your time today, what your habits are today. Your future self is literally a result of your present self. And if that connection is weak, then you will end up becoming someone of whom you don't want to be. But if that connection between your present and your future self is strong, then your dreams will become reality. Then you will reach that success that you've envisioned for your life. Then you will live your life and you won't be sitting in the waiting room. You know what I mean? Like, you'll be able to look back on your life and be like, holy crap, I lived a good life. I did the things that I've always wanted to do. I did the things that I said I was going to do. And I stayed true to who I am and what my purpose and passions are.
Earlier, we talked about a couple of different activities that you can do to sort of prepare yourself or get in the mindset or thinking about your future self. So you have this activity in your book that I kind of want to focus on here. It's called the Dream Day activity.
Mm-hmm.
What is kind of the premise for this? Why do you use this activity? And also, can we kind of walk through maybe step by step an example of this?
Yeah. So what was really important to me in writing a book is that I didn't just want to get people hyped up temporarily and motivated temporarily about the idea of their future self and working towards it, but I really wanted to give them practical tips that will ensure that once they put the book down and when we're several months into the future, it's still something that they practice in their day-to-day life. And it's not just because of the motivation, the excitement, or the emotions that the book that brought out that made them excited about it, but it's the fact that they're actually implementing it in their everyday. And so part of how I do this in the book is by offering something that I call the Dream Day activity within the book. But I also help prepare you for what it looks like after, doing the Dream Day activity and how to pivot and how to make sure that you are implementing habits that are sustainable. You know what I mean? Like, trying to really set you up on a strong foundation to carry this onward into your life for a very long time. And so the Dream Day activity is actually an activity where I ask you, like, hey, if you do not have at least 20 minutes to do this activity, don't read this chapter. You know what I mean? Like, give yourself some real good time to think about this and do it. And it's based on the idea of, hey, we are going to think about what our day looks like, 5-10 years into the future. Okay. And we're going to detail every aspect of our day 10 years into the future and think about it in such a way that we start to really connect our present self to our future self. That's the whole point. And so I give a bunch of prompts and I say, hey, grab a piece of paper, write today's date 10 years from now, and I'm going to ask you several different questions. When you wake up, what kind of bed do you wake up in? What do the sheets feel like when you wake up? What's the first thing that you do? Do you go downstairs and you make yourself an espresso with your fancy coffee machine? Because that's personally what I want to do. Or do you wake up and you read a book? Or do you, go on a run? Like, what do you do when you wake up? Who are you living with? Are you with a significant other and children? Are you living by yourself? Are you living with friends? Are you in another country? Where are you? So we really go through day by day in painstakingly detail of what you want your life to look like 10 years from today. And it's really in an effort to make you realize that hopefully 10 years from today, you're still going to be living and you're still going to be doing kind of these normal things. But there's a very specific person who wakes up, gets out of their silk sheets, or I guess not silk, satin sheets, goes downstairs and uses their fancy espresso machine. That is not me today because I cannot afford to wake up in satin sheets and to have a fancy espresso machine. But I'd like to in the future because I really like coffee and I really like, just the intricacies of making an espresso shot and foaming milk and doing those kind of things. Like that's what I enjoy. So yeah, would I like to buy a $7,000 espresso machine one day? Yeah. Is that kind of ridiculous? Totally. But who the freak cares? So it's like really trying to create this connection with what you want your day to look like. Okay, then reflecting back on yourself today and being like, now what do I need to do today to get there? Because I am certainly not going to get to the point of buying a $7,000 espresso machine if I am spending $7 on a Starbucks today every day. You know what I mean? Because I can either get that $7,000 espresso machine by saving $7,000 or by just having enough money that I can spend $7,000 like that. And so what my point is that no matter how I end up getting that espresso machine one day, is I need to start being the person and taking the actions and having the mindset that, hey, if that's what I want one day, then I need to start working towards it right now.
Yeah, and I really like this dream day activity because you're not so much always focusing on that like success. Like you're focusing on the big picture of like what success feels like to you, right? And to me, in some ways, I've tried to also work towards maybe some of those things. So you say like, do you go downstairs and make breakfast? Do you what bed do you wake up in? Like it's kind of hard to control that now because of the monetary value of getting a big bed. But I'd say I enjoy my bed more now.
Yeah.
But I think about that like, what would my perfect Saturday look like? And it's like, I wake up and I make breakfast and I go for a run. Well, I've done that before.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's those little things that you can start working towards that one day eventually, those habits, you also go into habits in your book, but all these little things compile into your dream. And it's like, it's slowly you get there, right?
And what I think that most people don't realize until it's too late is that it's not the ultimate goal of success that makes you feel successful often, but it's the way that you live your day-to-day life.
Yes.
And the people that you have in your life, the way that you treat them, and the person you've become in the process that makes you feel more deeply fulfilled. So to a certain extent, am I going to feel fulfilled when I become a New York Times bestselling author? Yes. But will I feel more fulfilled with the fact that I get up every day and I go on a run, that I eat healthy, that I can make myself a little espresso, that I have a relationship with my kids because I'm able to spend time with them, that I spend more time with my family than I do at work. Like that ultimately on my deathbed, I have the realization right now, as young as I am, I know that on my deathbed, that is what is going to fulfill me and that is what is going to feel like success. Not the title of New York Times bestselling author, not reaching my first million. Like I know that that's not what's going to fulfill me at the end of the day. So that's why I really wanted people to take the time to think about what is really going to fulfill you at the end of the day and what is going to make you happy and how can you start working towards that now.
Again, it comes back to the person that you become. You go in later and you talk about hidden skills and obvious skills, and there's an activity for that as well that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And that it's really nice to see with the self-help book that it's not just I'm reading this and I'm taking in all this information, but you can actually act on it. And I think that's the biggest thing to me that makes this such like a good book too, because it's actionable.
Thank you.
And before we go, I have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So what's in store for you next? Are you working on a new book or what?
Yeah.
What's going
so
on?
I'm actually already writing my second book because there's just so much that comes in my mind. There's so much I'm thinking about all the time. So I'm already writing my second book. And like I said, if I want to be publishing a book every year and the 80-20 rule and having a long-term vision with this whole thing, yes, I'm already writing my second book. I'm hoping to produce a podcast of my own by the end of the year.
That's so cool.
And I'm continuing to just promote my book, go on book tours. And I'm just hoping to grow my online media presence as well.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're already working on a book. I thought you said somewhere I read somewhere that you were already working on something, but
yeah.
I won't ask you anything else on that, just so that way we can build up.
We can
suspense.
discuss it on the next podcast.
Yeah, we can. Next time I have you on, we'll be talking about your next book. I'm really excited. But two last things. If you had one piece of advice that you could give, what would it be?
If there was a singular piece of advice that I could just give to everybody and everybody could hear it, is to just be honest with yourself. I think it's so easy to lie to ourselves about what's making us happy, what's making us feel fulfilled. If we're living the life that we actually want to live, if we're doing the things that we actually want to live, just be honest with yourself. It's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it'll always be worth it.
It's a great piece of advice. And I feel like you are kind of living proof of that, honestly, being yourself and expressing yourself in a manner that is all you,
Thank you.
So I really appreciate that. And the last thing I have for you is, where can listeners find out more about your services in writing?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at author Jade Cessna. That's Cessna like the airplane. And then I'm also on Twitter if anybody wants to join me over on X. At Jade M Cessna. Yeah, I know we got to get that right. Yeah. But yeah, I'm all over social media. I have my own website, so jadecessna.com. You can find me there. But yeah, just hit up Michael if you want to find me. But don't give out my phone number, sir.
I won't. Yeah, there will be for those who are. There is a new mailing list, and I know you have your own mailing list, and I will be. After this podcast is released, I will be sending out some information with your books and where people can find more resources from you. So
perfect.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been great.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
My guest today was Jade Cessna. She's the upcoming author of the book Dreamer to Doer and a content creator on Instagram. If you are interested in learning more about Jade's work, check out at author Jade Cessna on Instagram or follow her on Twitter at Jade M Cessna. Jade's book Dreamer to Doer releases April 16th and is available for purchase on Amazon. For more philosophy, self-help, health, and historical content, tune in here once a month to Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us here and on Instagram at TNHP_podcast. For updates, content releases, free resources, or everything TNHP, subscribe to our new mailing list. I'm your host, Michael Swigert, and I thank you for joining me today on the New Human Project podcast.